I recently did a really great podcast with my friend Robin Seyr. One of the most important topics we talked about is how Bitcoin is ownership. We also talked about some other topics as well. If you want to, you can skip through the topics in the description below. I included the timestamps. Robin, we've had a couple conversations. Of course, people can go back, they can look at the old conversations, just search for both of our names. And I think there's a lot of value added onto those. There's tons of value in those conversations. If you want to, just search for Robin Seyr, Seyr, and Rajat. You just search for that, you'll find it. But Robin, I have a question for you. You have a great podcast. You have an excellent way of asking people questions, of getting information about Bitcoin. I've listened to tons of your podcasts, and I feel like every time I learn something new. I learned something from your techniques as well. But the question that I wanted to ask you, so you've had 180 interviews with Bitcoiners from around the world. You post quotes from your interviews on Twitter. You've had a recent interview with Michael Saylor, which is amazing. The conversation was great. I listened to the whole thing and my mind was blown. I didn't understand half of it. So what are the most important things that you've learned in your 180 interviews with Bitcoiners?
Oh man! First of all, I also did not understand everything what Michael Saylor said. Like, I had to Google some stuff myself back then. There's so much in there, and I actually want to write like a book or some articles around that because when you have so many guests, and I actually have like 180 different guests on. Like I'm approaching like 200 interviews. Sometimes there are like two guests. Sometimes I have a guest on twice. So I think I'm actually approaching like 180, 190 different guests on from different brains that I actually have different insights into. And I feel like the biggest thing I take away is, of course, about Bitcoin. But way more interesting than that is like, what's the common thread that all people think about? And I think when I have to put it down to one specific word, it comes down to ownership. Like when we talk about in the podcast, not about Bitcoin, but more about life in general, then we come really quick to the topic of like, you have to own your decision, you have to own your time, you have to own your things. And then with Bitcoin, of course, it's all about ownership. You want to own your own financial energy and you want to be the master of your financial energy. So like ownership, I think is the main thing that is the takeaway always from those conversations. Like, why not real estate? Why Bitcoin? Yeah, you can own Bitcoin way more than you can own real estate, and all those comparisons we can get into in the details afterwards. But I think ownership is the main thing, like the headline. If I would write a book about my podcast, I might call it ownership or something like that, because this is the main thing that is really important for Bitcoiners. Even also Bitcoiners, even though we know that Bitcoin is a better store of value than real estate, a lot of Bitcoiners actually want to have their own house. I know that you own your own house. I know that Jack Mallers, for example, owns his own house. I know that a lot of Bitcoiners actually have the goal to once sell some of the Bitcoin to own their own house. So like ownership, even though we know real estate is a worse investment than Bitcoin, we want to own our things. So I think this is a big thing in Bitcoiners' mind, and this is one big takeaway from that. And from there we can go in many different directions wherever you want to go there. But if I had to summarize it, I would summarize it in ownership.
I agree with you. You made a couple of great points there. Real estate's better than, or sorry, Bitcoin's better than real estate. But I want you to explain something from my audience. So, why is Bitcoin ownership better than real estate ownership? Have you thought of this? Is this something that you've really dove deeper
Yeah.
into?
I was actually, before I went into Bitcoin, not a lot of people know about it. I think sometimes I mentioned it on a podcast. Before I went into Bitcoin, I was planning to go into real estate. I was a stock bro. Like I was into stocks. I was into Tesla, Apple, all those things. And Tesla especially did really, really well when I was investing. I think like over 1,000% plus, like it did really good to me. And then as I accumulated some capital and I was like, what next can I do? What can I diversify in? What can I do to further enhance my my portfolio. And I really wanted to get actually in real estate. And I was planning, like I was researching about it. I was even talking with banks. I was talking with players in the game. I was talking with people that already did it and were successful. I also talked with people that did it and was unsuccessful with it. Like I wanted to really learn what real estate is about. And then I learned about Bitcoin in the same time. And then Bitcoin became so much more interesting for me because all the things that were in my head, like, oh, if I have real estate, I want to rent. I want to rent it out. Like, of course, I want to have a cash flow from it. Or then have to care for someone that lives in there, that he actually pays and that he's happy. Then what happens when there's a toilet that is stuck? I have to send someone there, or I have to do it myself. If I send someone there, I have to manage that person. So then it's like, oh, it's more like a business. It's not like an asset. Like you don't really save your money in real estate. You invest your money in real estate more. Like it's a business more than a savings technology. And to your argument with owning it versus not owning it, I mean, the obvious thing is you can own your Bitcoin in your head. You can literally go with $1 billion in your head in Bitcoin, go over every border, and nobody knows even that you have it. You cannot do that with real estate. You cannot even take real estate. And if like, there's always this crazy growth, like try to not pay speeding tickets, try to not pay any fines. The government will come and will remind you to pay. When you refuse to pay, at some point they will take your house, they will take your things away from you, and then then you really know you don't own it. And even with small things like gold or something like that, like if someone comes to your house and wants your house or wants your gold, they can either forcefully take it from you or you give it to them. But they can always have it. They can always shoot you in the head, and they have it. With Bitcoin, they can still shoot you in the head. But if you don't want to give them your Bitcoin, you have the choice of dying with your Bitcoin. Most likely, 99% of the people will not do that. But it's amazing that we have that choice.
I was reading something where they said how if, let's say, you have your private keys somewhere, you've set them aside, you've put them somewhere, and nobody knows, of course, where they are. Best way to do it, obviously. If they come into your house and they say, give me all your wealth," if you don't, I'm going to kill you. They can't get your wealth, right? And then there's also the fact that your Tesla holding. So I was in the exact same position. I bought Tesla in, I think it was 2012. It was around $80, and I sold it at $82. So I
Oh,
make $2 a share. Missed out on $200 a share, but that's a win right there, right? I thought that was pretty funny. I
really
actually
cool.
worked in the brokerage. The brokerage. I worked in a stock brokerage as well. The I don't think most people realize that you can't take physical custody of your shares unless you pay $200 or $300 for the stock certificates, right? That's pretty crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's always like, what's physical ownership of a share of a stock? Like, what does this mean? Like, if because it's still what does it mean? Do you take physical ownership? I never heard about that actually.
Yeah, there's no real, I mean, it's not even really physical ownership. All you're getting is a stock certificate. You're getting a piece of paper that says you own this stock and you can cash it and you can sell it. You can do whatever you want with it. But it costs like $300 for them to print out that piece of paper and give it to you because they have to register.
Oh,
They have to take it out of their own. It's basically like if you went to Coinbase, you had your Bitcoin there and you wanted to withdraw to your own wallet. Basically they're going to charge you a fee for doing it. It's obviously the chain. But in this case, I think they have to do some kind of registration. They have to deregister it from their end. Then they have to put in your end. They have to put in your name. Then you have to give you a piece of paper. It's basically just a headache, right? It's crazy. Even with real estate, right? I mean, when you own real estate, you're not when you own real estate as a rental property, you're not actually living there. You're expecting somebody else to take care of your property for you,
singer.
right?
I mean, that's an interesting concept that you have physical ownership of a stock because it's still a piece of paper. It's like it's still no real ownership.
it's a piece of paper, and then the actual company is in the background, and you can still be impacted by, let's say they make bad decisions, you can still be impacted by that negatively. It's not like you're going to be able to recover from that, right? Another great point you made, real estate is a business. uh there's profit and losses, there's revenue, there's expenses. People don't see it this way. People even I used to be like this. I mean, I used to believe so strongly that Bitcoin can't compete with real estate, and once you wrap your head around that, it's crazy. When did you figure that out? When did you figure out that real estate's better than Bitcoin, or Bitcoin's better
Right.
than real estate?
For me was around end of 2020, beginning of 2021, where like I think beginning of 2021, where I was really shifting all my wealth into Bitcoin. I never started with real estate. Like I was really deep in the research, but I never really started. Like I never bought a rental property or something like that. I was without Bitcoin, I probably would have done it, but I've never started it. And for me, the more critical decision for me was like Tesla versus Bitcoin, because I was so emotional attached to Tesla, but also I really liked the story around Tesla. I really was a Tesla fanboy, even to a certain extent. I mean, they made me also huge returns, but at some point I was like, what happens if there's like a management team doing something weird? Elon Musk is going away, or even Elon Musk is doing something bad. Like human can make bad decisions, and then I was like, Bitcoin does not have this. And then an interesting thought also, like Tesla has Bitcoin. Like if Tesla is successful, Bitcoin also benefits from that a little bit, because they will always have a Bitcoin strategy. And I think their Bitcoin strategy will expand a lot in the next like 5 to 10 years, even though Elon Musk is talking a lot about Dogecoin and those things. And then I was kind of developing my Bitcoin theory. And from the starting on, I had this theory around like, oh, what is Bitcoin look like in 100 years? And back then in like 2020, 21, I had this theory of like Bitcoin in 100 years will be a full Bitcoin standard. I but I kind of went down with my timing. Like I was like, this will happen probably way sooner than I thought in the initial days, because I did not have on the radar that El Salvador is already embracing a Bitcoin standard. This was in 2021. This was after I made my theory. I was like, what? I had this in plan like in 10 years. Then Bitcoin ETF came a little bit earlier than I expected. Publicly traded companies came in a lot, even though there was already MicroStrategy in there. So a lot of things happened way faster than I thought. Like I had the history of money in mind, and when I extrapolated everything out, I was like, yeah, like it will take a long time. Like if I'm really old, I might see a Bitcoin standard or like something similar to that. But every day I'm listening to Bitcoiners, I'm reading about Bitcoin, I'm like, I'm getting more bullish. Like it's so fascinating how this thing sucks you in. And also with your story, it's like you thought real estate is better, and you then get to know more and more about Bitcoin, and then you're like, oh no, Bitcoin is actually, but it's like it's the only rabbit hole that like keeps getting more interesting and exciting, and the deeper you go, it's really fascinating for me. And I'm more and more thinking of like, oh, it could be there in like 20 years. Like in 20 years, if things really develop fast, and things could develop fast, we could see a major growth in adoption. I mean, we have examples in the history of like in the US, the development from horses to cars. I think we needed like 40 years from like 10% of automobile car adoption from to 90% of adoption. 40 years is a long time, depending on like how far are we with Bitcoin adoption? How do you measure like what's Bitcoin adoption looking like right now? Are we at like 5%? Are we at like 20%? If we count every person that has Bitcoin in there, we are probably more like 20%. If we count people that have a significant amount of their net worth in Bitcoin, then we are way closer to like 5%, even in the US. So it's hard for me still to wrap my head around when this hyper Bitcoinization, this Bitcoin standard will actually come. But I'm more and more certain that it actually will come, and this fiat system and those fiat currencies will dissolve at some point in a very insignificant role. I also don't know 100% if those fiat currencies will stick around in some sense or completely vanish. It's really hard for me to say, but yeah. Oh, you brought up a chart. We're still early. Are you're muted, by the way? I see.
Oh yeah, there you go. So
Yeah,
sorry,
now I hear
I
you.
saw this from you. I was looking at this. I was looking through your Twitter today, this morning. I was just looking through to see what kind of posts you've done in the recent year, in the recent few little while. You had a couple of them just about the adoption, and this one stood out because, of course, you're talking about adoption, and it's actually really insane to me that most people think the ending should be the beginning should be easy. Like most people say, oh, it's been around for 15 years and it's done nothing. It's done zero in 15 years. The next 15 years, the compounding is what people don't really quite understand. I think people don't understand exponential growth, where the growth doesn't happen up front. From 0 to 1 is much more difficult than 1 to 100. We talked about this in our last podcast, where we are talking about how you on YouTube, your first, let's say, 100 subscribers is going to take you a really long time. First 1,000 subscribers is going to take you a really long time. But then the next 1,000 is going to be so much quicker because you've already laid the groundwork. It's basically just you're growing, you're building on top of what's already been built. Even with YouTube, something that people may not know. When you start off with YouTube, when you want to get monetized on YouTube, you need to get a certain amount of watch hours. So people need to watch your content for a certain number of hours. It took me, I think it was almost 2 months to get to my watch hour requirement. Now, the watch hour requirement was 4,000 hours. Now I'm getting that watch hour requirement in 10 days, 12 days, 13 days, right? That's just how it is. It compounds over time. So back to what I was talking about with Bitcoin here. We see here that the technology moved from basically nothing down here, down at the bottom with that massive phone, and then it moved up to something a little bit better, then something a little bit better. But the difference with Bitcoin is that we've already built the ground floor. It's already there. The foundation is already there, right? With the internet, for example. There was another graphic that you posted where it was something about computers, then electricity, then computers, then internet, then cell phones, then Bitcoin. I saw it this morning. The great graphic. I couldn't find it, but it shows you that we have the ground floor already laid. The cell phones, everybody, how many people in the world have cell phones? 5 billion or something like that, 6 billion maybe. Out of those people, every single person can adopt Bitcoin. I want to go into ownership more with you. I feel like that was a great insight that you got from all of your guests. So, how does ownership change the dynamic that we have with other people? Is this something that you've looked into, you've thought about?
It completely changes the game. Like when we all of a sudden have a system where we don't have to trust a third party. Like when I send Bitcoin to you today, I can send you the transaction verification and you can see that. We don't have to trust a third party to do that. And I think it will become a lot of trust come back in society, because if a Bitcoin transaction goes south, there has been a mistake made by the sender. If you don't receive it, the sender made a mistake. That you cannot say like, oh, the bank or like something. It's P2P. Like if I don't give you the bill in person, then they're like you can clearly see what's happening. And I think this is completely changing the game. It's like, for me, it's like the game of Monopoly, right? And Monopoly is an amazing game. I love to play it like hours with friends and really war against each others. But there is no need for someone to play the bank, because we all see everything. Like we are on a round table and everyone sees all the players. We see someone doing all the things, and that's an amazing comparison to Bitcoin. And that's actually, I think Anthony Pompliano made this comparison when I first got into Bitcoin, and that's how I got blockchain, how it works. And that's interesting example. And I think from that example we can extrapolate how trust might be changing in the society. So when every player in the game is really looking at the whole game, and we can look at Bitcoin, the code, we can verify it. It's open source, the code, we can verify the blockchain, we can verify transactions, we can verify all the balances when we want to look at that. It's all transparent there. And that's amazing. So when we look at now Monopoly, the game, if I ran over a house and I have to pay rent for that, as it's always there with Monopoly, I can make this transaction from me to Bob, and everyone sees that. And because everyone sees that, nobody questions that. Like there's no backhanding things. And I think on a broad scale, this will bring trust back to society. And think about that. Right now, everyone has fiat, and everyone has fiat is stolen from, and most are not even aware of that. What makes this with a human being with a brain that noticed that there's something missing? I think Jeff Booth put it so perfectly. You're in the house, and someone comes in your house and takes this piece out and this piece out, like just one small piece out every year. After 15 years, you're like, oh shit, my house is empty. And this is something that people notice, but they can really not put the fingers where is this stealing, this theft coming from. And I think from there, a lot of distrust in society also stems from. And if we have sound money as a standard, the society and people will have more trust in each other. And I'm not saying that there will not be any crime. There will always be crime. Humans will always be humans. People will also do bad things when they are on a Bitcoin standard. But I think this complete distrust in politicians, this completely distrust in other people, this will completely change society from that level. And then another point that I sometimes do in my podcast, when you run on a fiat standard, it's like running on sand or mud. It's like, oh, you can come forward, you can do some miles in there, but you really are dragged down all the time. You save like €1,000. 1 year later, it's only €800 worth of it. So that's like a bummer in itself. But if you are on a Bitcoin standard, it's like a solid street. You save €1,000. 1 year later, it's €1,500 because it's a sound money standard. Once it's actually a standard, the jumps in purchasing power will not be as big as it's now, but still there will always be something rising, because Bitcoin is deflationary or disinflationary, if we are completely correct, and that's why the main value will always be a little bit more, because we get better in producing things, we get better in being efficient as human beings. So I think this completely changes the game, and this is also something I think about a lot. Like, what will change on a Bitcoin standard? Like when we actually, everyone has their own Bitcoin wallets or like Lightning wallets or whatever on a second layer, and we can transact in that. This is something I think a lot about, and I think we don't even know what will happen then. Like what the possibilities are there. Like just look back like 40 years. Go to someone 40 years ago and tell them what we are now doing with computer technology, and they will be like, it's crazy, that will not be that fast. And we are that fast. Like innovation and development, it is fast. It comes like a massive train to us, and Bitcoin will bring a lot of things to us. And money is so fundamental to our lives, and because it's so fundamental to our lives, if the money is switched from a bad monetary standard to a good monetary standard, this will have great impacts to society. So I think that will have major impacts. What's your theories?
So I was thinking, I agree with everything you're saying. It changes a lot. It changes how the world, it basically changes everything about how the world works, right? Because everything is touched by money. Even this water bottle is touched by money. The way that it was made, the design, all that stuff was impacted by money. Do you think this would be different? Maybe if we had a sound money standard, maybe it would. Who knows? But I think the ownership, the fact that you're saying how people will trust each other more, they'll see where they'll see the world more clearly, right? There's going to be no fiction in or friction, sorry, in how people transact. There's going to be no like okay, I think this is something that we talked about last time, but I don't remember if we did. But Visa, for example, Visa took something like 50%. So they had 50% net profits. They made like $15 billion or something crazy like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think they made almost the same amount in profits as Walmart.
And that's
That,
massive.
when you think about that, it blows my mind because what is Visa providing versus what is Walmart providing? Walmart is providing something we need. We need that no matter what. And Visa is providing something they're providing basically they're basically just like they're a placeholder, right? Because gold doesn't work, right? We don't use Bitcoin. We use the fiat currency system. The fiat currency system is fake. We use fake money, so we need a fake system of companies that help us process these transactions. And those fake companies need to pay their employees to do their fake jobs, so they're going to keep making profits. It goes so deep. I think it's crazy to me that people don't see it yet. The changes that this is going to make. I also wanted to go into ownership and
Oh yeah, that's a good topic.
what are your thoughts on that?
There's like this meme like Bitcoin is defunding wars. I'm not
I posted
100%.
about that yesterday. I had a post about that yesterday. I think that.
Oh, I did not see it. I have to check it out. Really cool. I think
Let me pull it up. But go ahead with your
yes,
point.
yes. I think Bitcoin is might not defund wars completely, but I'm 100% sure that it will limit extremely the wars. Like we will have most of the wars are financed initially, of course, with tax money, but then this extended long periods of wars we have because we can print money and make the future generation pay for that. And that's something when Bitcoin strips the power away from the government to print money out of thin air, this changes the way how Bitcoin, how wars are made. It basically puts a price tag, a real price tag on wars. All of a sudden, leaders have to really think about, do I really want that war? If I spend now this 1,500 Bitcoin on a war, they are gone. Someone else has those Bitcoin. They are completely, I cannot get them back. It's like I cannot just print more of that. So everything just gets a price tag. I mean, I don't know if this comparison now makes sense, but I recently switched from my newest iPhone Pro Max to an iPhone 11 back, just because I was like, I just need Twitter on my phone. Like, why do I need an iPhone 14 Pro Max? I just had no clue. By the way, you're muted again.
You switched back?
Yeah, I switched back from an iPhone 11, iPhone 14 Pro Max back to an iPhone 11 because I was in my head. I was talking with Bitcoiners, and my girlfriend was also telling me, "Oh, why do you need that phone?" And I was like, "Why do I need it? What do I do with my phone? For recording, I use a camera. I don't need a good camera on my phone. That's not the reason. I rarely take pictures with it, and an iPhone 11 also has amazing pictures. And I was like, what do? I do Twitter. I call with people. I do WhatsApp. Like every iPhone can do that. I don't need the newest ones. So I traded the new phone in the 14 Pro Max and got an iPhone 11 with a new battery, and it's amazing. So it's like this is Bitcoin's. This is because of Bitcoin. Like my financial position is the same as it was like a year ago when I bought the new phone. Like it did not change. I'm not like poor now or something like that. the only thing that changed that I'm getting more and more actually in this Bitcoin mindset. I'm thinking more and more about actual sats and less about the fiat money. So I'm also starting now to accept Bitcoin from my sponsors. I'm trying to actually live on a Bitcoin standard more and more. It's hard because I live in Austria and there are like weird laws around that. But I try as hard as I can to live on a Bitcoin standard to actually experience that, even now, what it means. And maybe then I can wrap my head around the effect better. What will happen in 10 years when everyone does that? And this economic decision to not buy the newest iPhone, to step down from the newest iPhone to an older iPhone, make this step back, which is psychology really hard. But once I got the phone, and I was like, that feels good. Like it felt really good to have this phone because I can do all the things that I did before in the same way. It did not change my life at all. I just saved Bitcoin for that. Like it's just one small example for me.
And now you have this Bitcoin that's never going to go away. You're going to have
Exactly.
this. You're very likely going to be able to spend it in the future whenever if you want to spend it, if you want to hold on to it, if you want to give it to your future generations. You can do whatever you want with it, right? So back to the war, thing. Exactly what you were saying. When we have wars now, governments can just print money. They just issue new money. They borrow new money. I'm not sure if people have seen the U.S. debt clock. I want to show that quickly. The U.S. debt
Yeah,
clock. It's
like we have to pull it up because if people did not see it till now, they have to see it.
Yeah, right. So you can see here, the U.S. national debt is $35 trillion at the top here. Can you see my pointer? Does it show?
Oh, I made the screen really small. I will have to
Oh, no worries.
pointer. I don't
Oh,
see a pointer. No,
it's
I
at the
don't see
top.
it.
It's at the top left here. The U.S. national debt,
Oh, yes,
thirty-four
I see
nine
it now.
fifty nine. Right. So you can see that that's 34,959, and it's going up. It's going up regularly. So if we go to the U.S. largest budget items in the middle here, you see that here. You see Medicare, Social Security, defense and war. Right, defense and war, 910 billion dollars. This is to the U.S. federal tax revenue is 4.9. 4.9 trillion dollars. They're spending 20% of that on war. They're spending another 20% of it on the interest on this debt, right? And the only reason why this is happening is, of course, because money can be printed. It can be, there's no value to it. There's no reason to hold on to it. If anything, people who are getting rid of their money are much better off than the people who are holding on to it. The people who are in debt, the people who are in the most debt in the entire world is the U.S. government, and it's not like they're gonna ever pay it back,
Yeah,
right?
who would they pay back anyways?
Right, right. That's the thing. And they when people say, "Oh, we can just wipe it out, we can just get rid of it," I think they don't understand that they're the ones who are holding that debt because they have pensions, they have the what's it called, Social Security, right? This Social Security liability, 27, is that trillion? Yes, $27 trillion for Social Security liability. That Social Security liability is almost the same as the U.S. national debt, right? This is the amount that they owe. The total unfunded liabilities. Not sure if you've gone this far into the debt clock, but the U.S. unfunded liabilities is $217 trillion. Trillion. That's not billion. That's trillion. They don't. They're not even in that much debt yet, right? How are they gonna pay those things off? Right? And again, this is something that if we go back to ownership, if we go back to war, if they had to tax people, if they had to just send somebody a bill for, let's say, $25,000 to fund either Ukraine, um, Israel, whatever one. I'm not trying to be political here. That's not my point. The point is that the money is being spent. Your money is being spent without your permission because that's just how it is. That's just how we're used to it. We're okay with it now. At this point, we're just perfectly fine with it. We're okay with the U.S. government going into 40 trillion, 50 trillion. This is going to be 70 trillion, then 100 trillion, then 150 trillion, then 200, 500, a quadrillion at some point, right? 1,000 trillion. Right now it's at 35 trillion. I mean, I genuinely think that's going to happen within our lifetimes, right? This is going to be one of the triggers for why people will move to a Bitcoin standard. Okay, so I want to move a little bit away from ownership. I think that was a great conversation there. Very valuable. I want to go into more about what price we're going to have for Bitcoin to be used as a global asset. When do you think that'll happen? What do you think the price will be at that point?
Oh man, that's that's an amazing question. I love it a lot. So, what's the price point for people to use Bitcoin as money? That's the question, right?
Even for like billionaires and millionaires to start seeing it as a serious asset class. I don't think most of them do yet, right? Most of them
Oh,
just
that.
see it
Oh,
as a
that.
joke right now, right?
Oh, that's different. Okay, yeah. I think there are, like, when we come to finances, when we come to investing and asset classes, it's a lot about psychology. And most people right now have the old all-time high in their heads with like 69, 68,000 or something like that. The new all-time high, I feel like most mainstream people did not even notice that we ever actually hit the all-time high this year before the halving. When I go out in the world, they don't even like it's not an all-time high because the difference was so small. So people don't even notice that. We will have a major trigger point once we hit the 100K mark. But this will not be the mark when everybody takes it serious. I think this 100K mark, and I think we talked even about it when you were on my show, a little bit about that. When we hit the 100K mark, a lot of more people will again pay attention to Bitcoin. Is like, oh, what, Bitcoin is over 100,000 now. Like, I can remember when it was $100. I can remember when it was $1,000 because that was not that long ago. It was like 10 years ago. Everyone can remember. Like, if you are now 45, you can remember when Bitcoin was $100 or $1,000. And then it keeps growing up because like 100,000 will be a massive trigger point for a lot of people to come in the game and see Bitcoin like again. But I think around 1 million will be the point where a lot of people actually pay attention. Then they're like, oh, that asset class is now bigger than gold. Oh, by the way, like the switching of the gold market cap with Bitcoin, that will be an amazing trigger point also. I don't know when it will be, at what price point, because gold might also rise in market value because the US dollar is just devaluing at a rapid pace. So it might be at around 1 million, maybe it's like 800,000. Let's see where the actual point is right now. I think it would be 600,000 or something like that, the switching point. But maybe in a few years, it's already at 1 million when Bitcoin switches or like flips gold. But the flipping of gold, that will be a massive trend. Oh, perfect. You pull it up. What is that? Wait, let me see. That is, gold has now a market cap of 16
16.2 trillion.
16.2 trillion, and Bitcoin 1.3 trillion. So it's like a 14x from here, or like 12x or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's still massive.
And then, you know what the crazy thing about this is, the fact that gold is worth $16.2 trillion. Who knows how much gold is actually available? Nobody knows this is accurate. We haven't kept a count of how much gold was created since 5,000 years ago, right? Nobody knows. So all these numbers, technically this number is fake. Even silver, the number for silver and gold, they're both fake, because who's been paying attention to how much gold and silver have been mined over the last 5,000 years? Nobody knows. Nobody has any clue.
It's at best a guess. Like that's all what it is. And because we don't know if there might come like a time where there's like gold found somewhere on Earth or somewhere else on another planet. Like we are now more and more exploring the space things with Elon Musk, with Jeff Bezos does things with Virgin Galactica. Richard Branson, I think is his name. They are doing something with that. Why shouldn't they find gold in the universe somewhere? So like that's not out of the question. So like it's fascinating for me. But back to your question, I think the price point where Bitcoin hits or overtakes gold in market cap, this will be a time where every asset manager, every portfolio manager, every financial advisor has to take Bitcoin massively serious. And it kind of already started with the Bitcoin ETF, with Bitcoin being stable for like that long. But I describe it always as like, we have those buckets. We have those buckets that Bitcoin fills. We have this institutional adoption. We have the Bitcoin ETF. We have countries with like El Salvador and all those different buckets that are now all there. Like, as you said also in the beginning, when we talked about the phone, when you talked about that meme that I posted, we have those buckets that are now starting to get filled, but all the buckets are already there. Like the fundamental groundwork has been done in the last 15 years. And it's kind of now the starting point where the risk is almost at zero for Bitcoin. Like there's always risk. Like there's always the chance of a black swan event that nobody sees. But like if you invest for that, like you cannot do anything, then you just have to kill yourself because there's always a black swan event somewhere. So the risk is almost at zero, and the gains that happen in the next 10 to 20 years for Bitcoin with flippening of gold, with all the buckets that are now having a little bit in there, but really can be filled in the next like 20 years. This is just a massive opportunity that unfortunately gets overlooked by so many people still in the mainstream media. And that's why I always try to like really spread, as Michael Saylor said in my interview, spread Bitcoin with as much love as we can. And I'm never pushy with Bitcoin adoption, but if I meet someone where I'm like, oh, they're actually struggling financially, they're having more hardship than they should have, then I'm a little bit more pushy with my Bitcoin adoption if they actually can really benefit from it. If it's some rich dude, I'm like, oh, there's Bitcoin, but I don't worry about you. You can buy it later when it's at the million, because I know you will buy anyways. So I don't care if you buy now at 50,000 or at a million. I'm here if you have questions, but I will not force it down your throat. But if someone actually struggles, I try to be more active with the orange billing.
This article was something that, not to cut you off, but this article was something that I saw. You were talking about how we might go to space to get gold, but there's gold in the oceans, $771
Yeah.
trillion worth. People say that it's so the quantities are so small, but what I'm more referring to here is people will start mining gold under the oceans if the price goes too high, right? One of the only reasons why people don't go for that right now is because the price isn't high enough. It's not profitable. Eventually that'll happen. We don't even have to go into space. We have the gold here already, right? And eventually that gold is going to come into the market. If the price, let's say the price goes to $10,000 and you can get 1 ounce of gold for $10,000, it goes up 4 times from here. Who knows how profitable it'll suddenly become for somebody to go into the ocean to develop the technology to get to that gold and start bringing it to the market, right? How many ecosystems are they going to destroy? How many animals are they going to kill? And that's the thing, right? I think that's one of the differences between having a digital asset that everybody can rely on and provably say that there's this much. They can say that we have only this amount and this is the value, compared to gold, right? We have no clue how much gold is available. We have no clue how many people will go into the oceans and try to find as much gold as they can and destroy whatever they can, because nobody knows where it is, right? Because we're gonna have to mine. That's what's happening in multiple parts of the country, right? Or multiple parts of the earth, where people are just mining deeper and deeper because they want gold. Maybe they have some kind of technology to find it, but there's no guarantee of it being there. On the other hand, with miners can mine gold and they're mine Bitcoin, and they're guaranteed to get that 3.125 Bitcoin per block, no matter what, for the next what is it, 200,000 blocks or so, right? For the next 200,000 blocks. That's the difference. Based on what you were saying, I think that we can see that flippening happen a lot sooner than a lot of people expect,
And there's
right?
another aspect to it. Sorry to interrupt. There's another
No worries.
even more bullish aspect to it when you think about gold getting high in price, and then people not only starting to mine gold, but what happens to all the people that have at home small gold coins or small gold watches? They will see the news and they're like, "What? Let's see how much gold is in that gold watch that I have. What that the price is like." 50,000 euros for that watch that lies there, of course I sell it. Like the gold price has a massive drivers of more demand, more supply once the Bitcoin price gets higher. Like if, like I have this one example, that's why I just looked down there, because the only gold that I own, I can show here. Like it's a small gold coin, and it's something that my father gifted to me when I made my, I don't know what it's called in international, but in Austria it's like the first level of school when you're like 18 years old and you succeed that. There's like a big test to it, a big exam to it. And then once I exceeded that, I got that from my dad. And this has way more emotional value to me than it has any value in financial terms. But it went up a significant amount since I got it. And guess what happens when it really inflates? Even I think about, oh, maybe I should sell it. Maybe I can explain to my dad that I can have the memory of that without having the gold coin, because the gold coin is just so much more worth. Probably I will never sell it. But I think the point is, when gold really starts getting high in price, they will mine more, they will find more. People will sell their gold on gold watches and gold coins that they have lying around. We will mine in outer space. Like there are so many factors that will contribute to more supply to gold once the price really hits like a 10x from here. What happens when Bitcoin price 10x's? TikTok next block. Nothing happens to the supply. A lot more miner will come online, but they will make Bitcoin more secure, but they don't mine more Bitcoin. Like this is something people don't even think about. I feel like outside of Bitcoin. Like what happens to Bitcoin once we reach 1 million? More mining companies come in, more drive even more demand for it, but the supply stays the same, and that's what I think I in the initial days underestimated, and that's what I think a lot of people actually underestimate when it comes to Bitcoin, because there's just so much more demand coming in, and the supply just stays the same. It's just like water, and it's really interesting to see that. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that in.
There's something that a lot of people like to talk about. Have you heard of it?
You mean when like there's no new Bitcoin mined and we rely on transactions?
Yeah. So what people think is that Bitcoin's price is going to have to keep doubling for miners to stay online. I think they don't see it from two perspectives. I think this all works. It all it's like closing a loop, right? So with what you were saying, basically, what a lot of people who are claiming that Bitcoin has a security budget, miners don't want US dollars. They don't care about the US dollar value. They want Bitcoin, because the only way for you to get Bitcoin is to mine it, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to buy it from someone. Maybe it'll be KYC. Non-KYC Bitcoin on its own has a lot of value. It has more value than KYC Bitcoin, first of all. And then the security budget, people probably the security budget problem is essentially where people think that miners are suddenly going to stop mining Bitcoin if the price doesn't go high enough, right? And they don't understand that we don't care about the price. We want Bitcoin regardless, right? If I'm a miner and let's say I'm not making profits, for example, there are still reasons for me to continue mining. I know people who are mining from home. They have heaters, they have different appliances that they're using to mine. You can't see. The thing is that when you get that Bitcoin, it's one out of it's however much out of 21 million total. Nobody can change it. Nobody can remove that. Nobody can in a few years, the rest of the world, whenever they understand it, they will want that Bitcoin. It doesn't matter how much the reward is for miners. People think that miners are always going to have to be profitable, but no, that's not the case, right? Miners don't have to be profitable. People can mine from home. People can mine using their own resources, their own electricity. They don't have to go through all of the things that people that they think they need to go to. They don't need to have the price double every few years. It's going to happen regardless because the supply is decreasing by 50%. The amount of supply going to the market is decreasing over time.
I think there's also two other aspects to it. There's like, first of all, like when we look at history, hash rate was not coupled to the price till now. There might be some impact, but when we look at the hash rate, it's like a pure chart up, and we hit an all-time high in 2022, where we were at the low end of Bitcoin. Like we came from a high and we were crashing down to like 12K and 20K. At that point, we hit all-time highs in the hash rate. So clearly, price and hash rate is not coupled to each other. And then there's also something like difficulty adjustment, which prevents the thing, like when actually miners, which there is no trend or no data, anything in that direction, if miners actually would jump off Bitcoin and would turn off miners because of a security budget reasons, then the difficulty adjustment gets adjusted down. So it makes it more easy to mine Bitcoin. In the starting, you could mine Bitcoin with a laptop. And now you have to have this massive operations to actually mine competitive Bitcoin. When miners actually turn off, the only thing that happens, difficulty adjustment gets adjusted down. This gives an incentive for new miners to come online and really mine Bitcoin and makes it profitable again. Like this, the difficulty adjustment, I feel like is the most underrated invention of all time. That's such an amazing piece of technology that keeps all the things running in Bitcoin. Without that, that would be a problem. With the without difficulty adjustment, I think Bitcoin would never have come so far. But the argument of a security budget problem could become a realistic one without the difficulty adjustment. With the difficulty adjustment, there's no argument.
Yeah. So the difficulty adjustment, for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's a way to keep Bitcoin's blocks at 10 minutes per block. If there are more computers that enter the mining industry, then what happens is the amount of hash power, the amount of hashing, the hash rate increases, meaning that it becomes easier to mine Bitcoin, to find the next hash, to mine the next block. The difficulty adjustment is a way to keep that the rate of production at 10 minutes per block. If more computers enter the economy, the difficulty adjustment goes up. If computers sign off, it goes down. So let me show you from mempool.space. I think this is important to see. I think just looking at these numbers is so important. We can see the chart. We can see the actual difficulty adjustment. We can see here that, it seems like a lot of new computers may have came back to mining, right? Because it's now at 8.9 minutes. So what happens is if the average block time is less than 10 minutes, difficulty goes up. If it's more than 10 minutes, it goes down. So you can see there's a chart here. We can actually see, we go to mining, hash rate, and difficulty. We can see here, if we just zoom in, this line, the red line, is the difficulty adjustment. This changes every 2 weeks, depending on how many computers are mining, how fast blocks are being created. If we go to all, the number has just gone up. And if we zoom out, we can see here that in the beginning, it just seemed like a flat line, right? And then over time, this chart is very similar to the Bitcoin price chart, right? You can see here that the difficulty adjustment, the hash rate was all the same across the board. It actually it looked the same, and then over time it just skyrocketed, right? And when the price goes up, we can see here in these last few weeks, prices started going up after the halving, and now the difficulty adjustment is going up. More computers are entering the economy to mine Bitcoin, and more people want that reward. So the difficulty adjustment changes to keep that block reward, the time, to 10 minutes, and that's a very important concept. Robin, go ahead with what you were saying. Amazing
Yeah,
tangent.
it's I love that difficult adjustment so much, and I think it's underrated. I think it does not get enough airtime in all those Bitcoin conversations because we always focus like, oh, there's a limit to Bitcoin. There's an amazing economics. We really talk about the economics and the future developments and adoption. All those is really interesting and is really important that we talk about. But I feel like the difficult adjustment, that one small technical thing makes it all happen. Like it's like the inner regulation of the computers, turning the computer off if it gets too hot, making sure everything stays good. If it's too cold, it turns on the AC. If it's too hot, like it's some controlling device that keeps Bitcoin alive. So it's something really elegant and really cool, and it's great to to have that technology in our hands.
I have a question for you. Can you explain how the difficulty adjustment for Bitcoin compares to the difficulty of creating other assets over time? Like how,
What do you mean
uh,
difficult for other assets?
so for Bitcoin, it gets more difficult to create Bitcoin over time, while let's say for real estate,
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah. That's an interesting, because yeah, as you said, like with Bitcoin, it gets, because the hash rate goes up. We saw the chart that you just pulled up. So with more and more people entering, it gets harder and harder to actually find the block. You can still find the block with a small nerd miner, but this is like almost like a lottery. So if you really want to mine, you have to be in a mining pool and you have to have an operations. When we come to real estate, when we come to anything actually that we produce, it always gets easier because we get smarter. We don't get dumber with things. When we talking about real estate, when we talk about everything else, we get better in producing things. If you have a company that makes chairs, and if you are making the first chair will be so much harder to make than you made the 10th chair. And when you make the 10,000th chair or the 100,000th chair, it will be so much easier for you. It's also with like YouTube video production. The first video, we talked about that before we started. In the first video, I needed so much energy, so much research to actually get the first video starting. But once you are at episode like 50, it's really easy compared to things. And then you're like, all the processes are running and people are like, oh, how do you do it every day? I'm like, oh, it's pretty easy actually. But it was not easy in the beginning. It just gets easier with time because we get better in producing things. We get better in producing real estate. We get better in farming bananas. We get better in doing anything. So that's why Bitcoin gets harder and harder to produce. It gets harder and harder as an asset. It gets deflationary to a certain extent, because if people lose it, if people don't have it anymore, then like from that 21 million, we might be at 18, 15 million. We might already be at like 15 million because a lot of Bitcoin are already lost. Maybe at some point we had like 10 million because people lose it, or people just wanna take it to death with them because they think that's a charity act, and it is a charity act taking your Bitcoin with you. But with everything else, we get better in doing them. And when you think about real estate, we can build more houses on top of each other. Like there's so much land out there that is untapped. It's not like, oh, because it's a concept that people get in their head. That's why the argument sticks so good. It's like, oh, land is finite. No, it's not. Like we have so much land outside there. Like Dubai is building on an ocean. There was nothing. Now there's all the people. So that's. By the way, you're mute again.
Sorry, they housed something like 10,000 people by creating land out of nowhere, right? Out of nothing. They basically just created it out of nothing, and they housed so many people, right? I like to see condos as almost a layer two, right? Because you can
Oh,
build on
nice.
top. You can keep building higher and higher and higher. You don't need a neighborhood with 50 houses. Now you can build a condo with 1,000 units, and that
Mm.
changes everything. That makes that really hurts real estate investors, if anything, right? Because they're buying this place because they think it's scarce, but that living space is no longer scarce. People need houses to live in, of course. I get that. A lot of people will argue that, but the thing is that they don't need your house. And as it becomes easier to build houses, your house becomes less demanded. Fewer people want it, fewer people care for it. It's just the way of the world, right? Even gold, for example, gold, like we were talking about the difficulty adjustment. Gold becomes easier to mine over time, where it's not like technology is going to get worse. It's not like drilling technology is going to get worse. It's getting better over time. Keep getting better. Keep getting better. Okay, so one last question. We're about an hour here. One last question. I just want to ask you, what triggered you to become so passionate about this, about teaching others? About
I think I was always passionate about educating others for some reason. I was even that kid in school that learned a little bit younger kids how to ride a bike. I remember stories about that. I was helping my cousins out with school. Like I was always even under 15, even under the age of 15, I was always kind of passionate about helping others and educating others. So this passion became long before Bitcoin. In all the time when I learn something, I have a really big drive in me to tell everyone about it. I don't know if this is natural or like it's just like the things that has to get out of my system, and I try to educate people around me. And then when it came to Bitcoin, that's was such a great marriage because Bitcoin is such a deep topic. Other topics are kind of close to a certain extent because you can go only that deep. Because kind of, for example, when you think about another thing like diet, you can go deep on diet. But at certain point, you kind of figured out, all right, you need fresh foods, you need this and that, and those vitamins you need, and these things. Like there's at some point an end to the rabbit hole where it does not get that much more interesting. On the Bitcoin, because it's money, it touches so many things, and it's also in the future, so you can always speculate about things. Even if there's right now nothing to talk about, we can always speculate about the future, which or like make like hundreds of connections to past events, which then try to explain the future better. So with Bitcoin, it's like an endless topic, and I just got found myself in the last couple of years uh, in that rabbit hole where I learn myself a lot, but also then what I learn I give to other people. And how the channel and everything started was just because I don't want to. Uh, Actually, I started with Twitter, and one of the main reasons I did it, I wanted to get some wealth. Like I annoyed my friends enough with the Bitcoin things, so I was like, I want to find online friends that I can annoy about Bitcoin, and I found a lot of friends online that I can now annoy with Bitcoin, like you and my audience. And I'm really grateful that I found all those online friends that I can talk Bitcoin with, and I get feedback from that. And I learned so much about life, also in general, about that. And that's kind of my where my education came from, where my enthusiasm came from. Like the education was always there, but Bitcoin was just something that fits to me really, really nicely. Yeah.
it's once you see the difference that it can make in people's lives, the difference that it can, the way that it can change the basically the entire world, it's huge. It's hard not to tell other people, right? It's not like we're trying to. It's not like Satoshi Nakamoto's giving us Bitcoin for posting about it. We're basically just trying to. I mean, the goal here is to help as many. We our main end goal here is to help adoption, to take money out of the hands of state and banks, and that's what Bitcoin does, right? That's what I think that's what makes most people passionate. Of course, there's the aspect of helping other people to learn. I mean, most people don't even understand basic personal finance, right? And I was one of those people 7, 8 years ago. I didn't understand the basics. I understood nothing, right? And then Bitcoin just changes everything. It makes everything so much easier to, not easier to understand, but I guess it gives you a story. Yeah,
It's really beautiful. I love it a lot.
it is. It is for real. Okay, so I think that's about it for today. A great conversation, Robin. We should do this again. I would definitely love to get together with you again, just have this conversation again. If you want to talk,
I mean, that's pretty easy. I have it on on my T-shirt, Robin Seyr, my name, how it's spelled, and just write my name, Robin Seyr, together with no points, with no any other signs in it. Just Robin Seyr in one go on any platform, and you will find me. YouTube, I have the YouTube channel there. I have Twitter channel. I also have other channels, but Twitter is where you can reach me when you have a question and you want to reach out to me via DM. I read all the DMs and I respond to everyone that's that's good, like everything that's not a scam. Basically, I respond to, and on my YouTube, where you find all my videos with Rajat. Also, I already have 2 podcasts out there, and so many more with as Michael Saylor, Jeff Booth, Natalie Brunel, but also from really small ones. Like I take big pride in taking people that never were on any podcast before and putting them on my podcast to give them some stage. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I think 10% around that of my guests are actually guests that were the first time ever on a podcast with me. So I really like that, giving people that I just got to know about Bitcoin on Twitter or something like that, giving them a stage, giving some free, fresh faces a stage is really important also, and that's what I'm all about. And you can find me everywhere where there are videos available. I'm also on Spotify, Fountain, all the podcast platforms.
yeah, if you're following me, give Robin's podcast a look. There's a lot of great people on his podcast, great questions that he's asking, and he really goes very deep into multiple different topics. He goes into that what's that guy's name? Ratoshi.
Oh, Ratoshi, yes. I
Like
love it.
there's so many different types of topics. Of course, that one's more like abstract. It's not. It's of course not the reality yet, but who knows? Maybe in 1,000 years it will be, right? Then there's other podcasts like when you have me on your podcast, we talk more about where this is going, the potential, the ways that this can change the world, right? I give his podcast.
I,
Uh,
I, I, I even
Go ahead.
have some technical stuff on there. I had the guy from the Seed Signer on, so about
Oh,
multi-signature, we're
amazing.
talking about that. I had the time from the time chain calendar on, where we talk about the time chain and difficulty adjustment and all the things blockchain related. I had Wicked on, who talks about
Oh yeah,
UTXO management. So like basically what I'm trying to do is making the biggest library with all the greatest Bitcoiners in the world, and you can just dive deep into the topics. And I'm also like in the mix, in the making of making playlists, actually, like, oh, there's like technical things of Bitcoin, let's watch those 15 videos, or like those are 20 videos about where the price might go, and with different opinions. So like I just want to make a library where you can find the Bitcoin knowledge, where I get my Bitcoin knowledge. Like I rarely consume now content outside of my own podcast because I'm so consumed with my own podcast with all the guests, and this is kind of my representation of the understanding of Bitcoin also.
yeah, absolutely. So give him a follow. Check out his pages. Twitter is great. He has some great pictures, great memes, great content in general. Great
Thank you
having you
for
on here.
inviting me. Really grateful to be on your show.